Now, I know a lot can happen before the primary next month, but still, Mr. Rauner has taken himself out to about a 20 to 25 point lead over his nearest competitor. Let's see what Pat Brady thinks. He's the former Illinois Republican Party chairman, now as a consultant. He joins us this morning on our Turnkey.pro answer line. Pat, good morning. Welcome back to the John and Amy Gabfest. How are you?
Hey, good morning, John. Good morning, Amy. How you guys doing?
We're doing very well. Do you think there should be some sort of requirement, at least for all candidates who declare themselves a Republican or even conversely a Democrat, what have you, a requirement to participate in all debates, or at least a lot of debates leading up to a primary? Because clearly, I think Rauner's tactic now is to flood the airwaves with the commercials and try to stay away from live debates as much as he can.
No, and, Peter Fitzgerald did that when he beat Carol Moseley Braun a couple decades ago. And, in fact, the National Committee has imposed rules for the 2016 presidential race limiting the amount of debates and actually penalizing candidates that participate in non-sanctioned events because, what happened in the last election cycle, the Republicans spent 23 debates beating each other up. So now, I don't think that kind of rule works. You got to run your own campaign the way you see best, for better or for worse.
Well, if you were Bruce Rauner, would you skip out on most of these debates? If you clearly have such a size amount, a huge lead of 25%, would you bother?
Yeah, not for that reason. I think the reason that if I were advising him, I wouldn't do it because the other candidates, the three people that are well behind, spend the whole evening just taking pot shots at him. So it's not like it's a productive issue debate. It ends up just being, like the first one was, beat up on Bruce.
Yeah,
Day.
That's what I was going to say.
And those are his words. But, I got to give him credit. His first debate where they really did come after him, he handled it pretty well.
Yeah,
and
he did.
Like you say, he's got a 25-point lead, so he's doing something right.
Pat, do you get the sense that this is kind of a sloppy process? It's somewhat tough, but there's none better. I mean, we have to have vigorous primary seasons to make sure we're ready and in fighting shape for the general. Absolutely.
I'm a big believer in the primaries and these kind of debates and the slugfest. And even, not all the time, but sometimes it can be beneficial because some of these issues that the public sector unions are raising now with Bruce Rauner, they're going to dump a ton of money in to try to beat him in the primary. Because I think they believe he's the toughest in the general. Some of these issues are going to be vetted before the general election, kind of like what happened in the presidential race, although obviously Romney didn't win. But some of these issues get out on the table and they become less important when people actually vote in November.
So as a man in your position, what would you do to help Dan Rutherford? First, we had the federal lawsuit filed for sexual harassment claims, and now we're learning information about him going on several trips and sharing hotel rooms in Chicago studios with one of his aides, Joshua Lanning.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the mistake that the campaign made was the press conference a couple weeks ago, Friday. And I understand you want to get out ahead of it, but when you get out ahead of it, you want to get out ahead of it and leave the people that are asking questions with no more questions. Mm-hmm. And I think what happened there is he left the room and there were more questions left than were answered, and that really put him in a bad spot. He's really taken a tumble here in the polls and otherwise. So, All
right, so that mistake was made last Friday. Now what do you do? And I noticed that none of the networks, by the way, none of the networks touched this, their local media, local affiliates, none of them touched this story last night.
Last night, yeah, It wasn't. It's been 2 solid weeks. My counsel would be probably a little less. He did a lot of media and emphasized the same points that weren't overly compelling. And then they basically, what I didn't like about, the two things I didn't like about the approach was attacking the victim, the alleged victim. And listen, he's entitled to his day in court. I'm a lawyer. I firmly believe that. But secondly, the kind of goofy Rauner ties that he could never establish, he finally had to admit, I have no facts to support this, I think undermined his credibility, where he may have a very valid defense to all this. And some people are hurt here. The guy that was mentioned yesterday is a good guy. I really like. I feel terrible for him. So it's been a rough couple weeks.
You just wonder, though, if, look, I think that somebody's sexuality, and I'm not, take Rutherford out of this specifically, anybody. Somebody's sexuality, as long as it can't be used once I elect you to office, if I decide you're the best man or woman for the job, and I elect you to the office to watch our purse strings, even on a different level, to deploy the National Guard, what have you, life and death issues. If, in fact, your personal life, I don't think can be used against you as blackmail or as a hidden agenda, I don't particularly care. But then again, I mean, I know there's a significant number of Republicans voting in the primary that would disagree with me on personal issues like that.
I agree, John. I don't care at all. But to me, it was more of a judgment question, particularly after the Tribune story yesterday on the stays, and it's kind of a superior subordinate relationship from a management and judgment perspective than it is a sexuality question. And I mean, there were good, important issues raised. I mean, we've all had jobs with subordinates, and I'm not sure whether that was completely appropriate. But we're talking about electing somebody to run a state that's badly in need of new management, and the judgment question is important. And if you have questions or issues like that, maybe you're not the right guy. To lead the state, but the voters are going to decide that.
Back to Rauner here. The large pamphlet that went out to many Republican-leaning or guys with a history of voting and pulling Republican ballots, they received it. We looked it over. We had the people behind it on the program. Rauner, the fact that he's had a relationship with our mayor, Rauner, the fact that he's donated money to Ed Rendell and other Democrats, will Republicans forgive him for those transgressions if they think, in fact, he's the right man to straighten out the state financially or at least act as a roadblock against one-party rule?
Yes, I do believe they will. And I think the poll that you cited earlier in your program, with the 22-point lead, if you look throughout the state, he's got leads in very conservative, hardcore Republican areas of the state, south of I-80. And people are fully aware of the issues you just mentioned, so I think they will. And you guys have been covering it for years. The state truly needs some reform. It needs the term limits. It needs fiscal reform. It needs pension reform, true pension reform. So I think most people are pretty fed up and want something different. And I think that's what he represents, given what we've seen in the poll numbers.
Do you think it was a smart move for Bruce Rauner to meet privately with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie? Or should he have been like Bill Brady and gone out there and shown his face?
Yeah, I do. And they're friends going way back, as is Bill with Governor Christie, who I attended a couple of those events. Man, love or hate him, and I know he can be a mixed bag in a Republican primary, but he was certainly an impressive guy in the way he lays out what Republicans need to do. And I think a guy like him and some other folks that we're seeing in the Republican Party has me thinking we're going to have a pretty good cycle, because we're now returning to the party of issues and solutions and not just, negative, I don't like the president. So, I do. Christie, he was very, very, very good.
Guy's a talented guy. He raised $1 million, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Hopefully you guys can have him on, have a conversation with him at some point. He's just a very down-to-earth guy, very grounded. He was there with his wife talking about his kids, and not in that kind of fake political way. It was really a very sincere presentation. He's got some good ideas.
Do you miss your position as the Illinois Republican Party chairman, or was that like herding cats?
I enjoyed every second of it. I like politics. I believe in the principles of the Republican Party. It's a volunteer job that I did for 6 years, and good times, bad times. The party chairman is there to get yelled at, and we can yell at
punching bag, pinata, duck and cover.
Yeah, that's fine. Ever since Sister Marguerite whacked me with the ruler in 1967, I've been getting whacked.
You're used to it. Bring it on. I can take it. Take a number, get in line. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Always great having you on the program.
Yeah, guys, have a good day.
Take care. Yeah. There goes Pat Brady, former Illinois Republican Party chairman, now a political consultant. He joined us this morning on our Turnkey.pro answer line.